Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to Matthew. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who is born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people, Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Let us pray. May the words of my mouth, the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our salvation. Amen. Please be seated. Excuse me. Well, I've been reading the Bible for about 40 years now. In fact, over 40 years. And probably almost every one of those 40 years, I have read the story of the wise men. Many of you have been reading it for a long time too. But I have to admit that when I read it this year, I read it differently than I've ever read it before. And I came to believe, and I'm convinced, that at the heart of this story is a huge mistake. Did you catch it? The wise men actually went to the wrong place. You see, the wise men knew that a king had been born. They saw the star over in the east somewhere, so they knew the direction that they were going to go. And so instead of just following the star, they thought, well, where would we find a king? Well, you find a king in a big city, in an important city. You find a king in a city where there's palaces. You find a king in a city where there's lots of money because kings have lots of money. You find, a king in a place where there's movers and shakers. And so they said, well, we know where that place is. And so they set out on the road and they headed for a place just like that. And they went to Jerusalem. The only problem was Jesus wasn't in Jerusalem. King Herod was there, but they weren't looking for King Herod. King Herod was a man whose ambition was only exceeded by his cruelty. And historical evidence outside the Bible verifies what a cruel and sadistic and vicious man King Herod was. They were not looking for King Herod. The place they were looking for was not a city at all. It was just a sleepy little town with nothing much to commend it. It was 8 miles away. And so they got on their camels and they began the journey to following the star once again. And as they went by camelback, they had a chance to reflect on the mistake that they had made. They had a chance to learn. And what they came to learn, being the wise men that they were, was that they thought they wanted to go to Jerusalem, but Bethlehem was where they really wanted to be. They thought they wanted to see a great and important man, a king like Herod. But the person they really wanted to see was a child born in a manger, Jesus Christ, the Lord. And it strikes me that in our day, there are a great many people who are heading towards Jerusalem when it's Bethlehem where they too want to be. That there are a great many people who are enamored with King Herod when it's Jesus Christ that they need. And that before every one of us, as we head into 2013, there are a great many roads before us, a great many paths that we can take, a great many possibilities of things that we can do, but not all those paths take us where we want to go. Some of the paths, in fact, will take us far astray. Some of those paths will carry with them a high and tragic price. And so, just like it was important for the wise men to look at the paths before them and choose which was the right one, so it is important for all of us here today to look at the paths before us now and choose the path that is right for us. And that's my hope for us today. That's my simple hope. That's where we're going in this sermon, is that my hope is that when we walk out these doors this day and we head on into 2013, we're clear about what our path is, about what we need to do to make our lives better, to improve our relationships, to let the people who mean the most to us know how deeply we love them and how much we care about them. That's my hope, is that we will gain that kind of clarity. And in fact, I think we can even put that to words. I think that we can probably say something similar to what the wise men must have said. And what I hope we'll say is, this is my path, and I will be faithful to it. This is my path. And come what may, whatever it takes, no matter what people say, no matter what I have to do, I will be faithful to it. And to help us think a little bit more about what our own path, which will be different for each of us, to help us think about what our path might look like, I want to just walk us through some areas where we might say, this is my path, and I'll be faithful to it. And I want to start with relationships. I just want to start talking about relationships, because relationships are tricky things. They're so important, but they're so hard to get right. And we live in a high-powered area where people are so successful. And we live in an area where people enjoy such a high standard of living, one of the highest standards of living ever found on the face of this planet Earth. And that's a beautiful thing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes people feel bad about that. They apologize for that. No, I mean, there's some real blessings in that. That's not a bad thing unless the pace of life required to live at that level, the demands of life to live at that level, begin to do damage to our most important relationships. Unless someone else other than the people who are most dear to you, your family, your spouse, your children, your friends, gets the best of you. They get the best. They consistently and most frequently get the best of your time, energy, attention, and personal resources. Then, if that's the case, then living in this high-powered, high-paced area exacts too high a price. And so let me say a word to parents. Let me just start with parents. And let me suggest for parents that the thing we may need to say today is that parenting, this is my path, and I will be faithful to it. And there are a lot of other paths you can take, and there's a lot of other paths that people around you are taking. And it might look sometimes like they're having more fun, might look like they're rising higher in their companies, might look like they're traveling more than you do, might look like they're getting fancier things than you have, but this is your path. And you know how important it is, and you will not let anything turn you from it. And so what you may need to do, literally, and I would actually do this with my children. If your children are little, you do this at night after they go to bed. If they're teenagers, you do it early in the morning before they get up, because they probably go to bed later than you do. But what I would do is I would gently knock on their door after I thought they were asleep, and then I'd open the door and they'd be out, so I didn't surprise them or anything like that. But they'd be sleeping deep enough that it wouldn't wake them up. And I would go and I would kneel by the side of their bed. And by the way, I'm not just talking to women. I really am talking to men too. I mean, men, this might feel awkward. This might not feel, very natural. But man, it would be good if fathers did this. And I would just go, I would kneel by the side of their bed, And while they slept, I would just look at their face. And sometimes I'd reach out and just stroke a strand of hair, just touch their cheek. And I would say to myself, this is my path. It's one of the most important things I will ever do. I will be faithful to it. I may not rise as high in my career as some will. I may not get to travel and have all the, it might be hard. It will be hard. But if you say, this is my path and I will be faithful to it, you will never, ever regret it. For those who are married, your path may be giving your spouse the attention that they need. What you may need to do is look at your spouse and say, loving you, this is my path, and I will be faithful to it. With all that I am and all that I have, I will honor you. Remember those words? And those words were saying, I will put you first. I will put you before everyone and everything. And I'll tell you a little secret. For me, nothing has been harder in my life than my marriage. And here's why. It has nothing to do with Linda. Linda's a saint. You all know that. I mean, Saint Linda, call her that. She deserves it. It had everything to do with me. I was just too immature, and this is not false modesty. Believe me, this is the truth. I was simply too immature. I was simply too selfish and too insecure for marriage to come naturally to me. Too immature, too selfish, too insecure for marriage to come naturally to me. And man, so I would really hurt Linda. And I wouldn't, and I had to work on it, and work on it, and work on it. But I had this sense, and my sense was that everything else I would do in life would spring from my success or failure in this area. That everything else depended on my success or failure as a husband. I would only be as good of a father as I was first a good husband. I would only be as good of a priest as I was first a good husband. That I'd only be able to shepherd any kind of family if I learned how to take care of my own wife. That I would only be as good a person as I could be good to my wife. I'd never be a better person than I could be just good to my wife. And so I worked on it. And I don't know when, but somewhere along the line, it stopped being hard and it just started being good. And now, there is no one I would rather be with. There is no one I would rather spend time with. There's nothing I would rather do than just sit down with my wife and spend time with her. There is no one who makes me feel more deeply loved. There's no space in my life where I feel safer than being with my wife. Some of you, and I don't have anybody in mind, I just know, you put aside, some of you, you need to work on your marriage. That's your path. This is my path. I will be faithful to it. It's not your marriage is bad, just your marriage isn't much of anything at all. And people want more out of marriage than that. For others, if you don't do something now, you will not be sitting together here next year. You know that. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. None of this is anything you don't know. You already know this in your heart of hearts. For others, you're contemplating a path outside your marriage, a path of unspeakable hurt. Do not go down that path. Do not go down that path. Do not go down that path. And for others, and somebody came up to me after the 9:15 service and said, this is me. For others, you are just so unhappy. And you just need to be honest. You just need to stop pretending. You would think that in a relationship as close as a marriage, a spouse would know that. But spouses are often clueless. I don't know why that is. I only know that it is. And so what you need to do is you need to sit down with your spouse and you need to say, I'm sorry. I know this is going to hurt. I feel bad about this. And it's because I love you that I'm telling you this. But I am so unhappy. We need to find a better way ahead. And then you need to figure out what that way is. And here's what I can promise you. I can just absolutely promise you, because this is my story. No matter how bad it seems now, no matter how hopeless it seems that things could ever be different, it can be. It can be so, so good if in your marriage you look at your spouse and you say, this is my path. Loving my spouse, this is my path. No matter what, no matter who I have to tell to get the help I need to, because they probably know anyhow, and they sure will know if you get a divorce. No matter what outside help I have to get, no matter what, I will be faithful to this path. And then some of us, we're not married, we don't have kids, and our path in the year ahead is going to involve being true to our friends. Because again, this is another thing I know. It does not matter what you accomplish in life. It doesn't matter how high you climb, how much money you make, how big a name you make for yourself, how many things you accrue, how many fancy trips you go on. None of that matters if you lose your friends in the process. None of it. None of it. And the most common thing I hear wives say to me, you want to know what the most common thing I hear wives say to me is? Some of you can probably guess. Most common things I hear wives say to me is, my husband doesn't have any friends. He had them once when he was in college. He still longs for those days. He's so unhappy now. If only he had just one friend. That's what life in this area does to you, friends. When you get on that rat race, when you start, that's what life in this area, and I'll just tell you, it is not worth it. To come and have all that success and no one to share it with, man. So maybe your path in 2013 is to say, my friends. This is loving my friends well, being a good friend, whatever it takes, making time for them, saying I'm sorry. It doesn't matter if it's my fault or not. Friends don't come along all the time. It doesn't matter who is at fault. That doesn't matter. And so you say, this is my path. I'll be faithful to it, no matter what. And then just one more in the relationship class. Just very quickly. But this may be the hardest of all. Sometimes you get two good people, two really good people, but they're just bad together. I'm not talking about marriage. I always believe there's hope for a marriage. It's me personally, but I always believe there's hope for a marriage. But sometimes you get two people. They're good people. They're good people. They're just bad together. And they know that. You know that. You know that this relationship doesn't take you where you want to go. Maybe it's a work relationship, maybe it's a friendship, maybe it's a male-female thing. But you know it doesn't take you or them. You know it's not working. And the last thing you want to do is be in the same place next year and be in that same relationship when you've known for so long already that this just, it's not working. It's not who you are, it's not who they are. You know you need to be done with it. I know it's hard. If it wasn't hard, you would have done it already. I know it's scary. I know it's messy. But you know, without my even telling you, you know that relationship is not right. In 2013, it's the year, man, you just need to be done with it. You just need to be done with it. And if you're a Christian, not all of us are, but if you're a Christian and you hear God saying to you, this isn't right, man, end of conversation. You need to be done with that one. Because a lot hangs in the balance. Well, let me just quickly move on to a couple more things, a couple other areas that people may need to deal with in 2013. Another area would be habits, addictions, destructive behaviors that hurt the people we love. And how do you know if you have a problem with a destructive behavior, with an addiction, with a bad habit? I'll give you two real easy ways to know. The first one if somebody suggests you have a problem. In other words, if somebody comes up to you and says to you, you drink too much, you drink too much. All right? You do. And here's how I know that. They didn't want to say that to you. They haven't said that to you for a long time. That what they've said to themselves is, this is none of my business, I'm not going to say anything, I'm not going to say anything. They tried not to say anything, but somewhere along it just came to the point where they had to screw up all their courage and they finally said, you drink too much. And if they said that, you do. You do. And the other way you know is that if you think you have a problem. At a certain point in my life, I actually had a problem with fishing. And because I love to fish. That's how problems become problems, because we love to do them. I lived in an area where I was right on the water. I could go fishing anytime I wanted. I mean, I'd go fishing at 10 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock in the morning, in between meetings, over my lunch break. I'd go whenever I could. And it started to affect other areas of my life. And part of why I moved here was to get away from water. Had to do it. And, I mean, really. And the thing is that my brain wanted to keep on fishing because it loved it so much. And so for the problem to get to the point that it would penetrate all my defenses, that I could even begin to look at that and say, I wonder if I have a problem with this, well, the problem had to already be pretty bad. So if you're looking at something and thinking, I wonder if I have a problem with this, guess what? You do. You do. And here's what I know about that. What I know about that is, in the relationships you love, it is just you, the people you love, and that third other thing. And they pray every day for that third other thing to be gone. I will tell you that there are kids who go to sleep at night crying in their beds, just saying, I wish my dad had stopped doing that. I wish my dad had stopped doing that. I wish my dad didn't do that. I'll tell you that every night, man, there are spouses that go to bed crying and they just say, I wish my husband wouldn't do that. I wish my husband would stop doing that. God, please. And there is no greater thing you can do in 2013 that will prevent more suffering, that will create more healing, that will let people know how important they are to you, man, than to deal with that thing is, with whatever that thing may be. It won't be easy. That's why most people will never deal with these things, but you can. This can be your year, 2013. Whatever it takes, this is my path. I'll be faithful to it. Another one is debt. Living in this area takes a lot of money, and some people are just deep in debt, and it's killing you. And, I mean, pressure in your relationships, creating stress. And 2013, whatever it takes, whatever you have to drive, move into a smaller home, whatever people say, you just need to get out of debt. You need to live below your means. It's the single best thing you could do. And for other of us, and this really is my path in 2013. This really is where I hear God speaking to me. It's being true to our best and deepest and highest selves. Because I've never wanted to be a materialist. I've never wanted to be consumed with things. I've always known that there's a better way to live than that. I go on these mission trips to Haiti. We went down to Mississippi after Katrina, and saw all those people wiped out, had nothing. Go to Belize, people got nothing. And I think, man, I come back, look at this and say, oh, man. There's got to be a better way to live this. All these, I just sense how greedy I can be, how selfish I can be, how I get caught up. And so I say, I don't want to be a materialist. I don't want to be stuck up in the consumer culture. But I get back here and it's just like, I just get sucked right back in it. And I know that is not the right path ahead. And for me to be true to who I am, man, requires me to live simply. And it doesn't matter what anybody else does. It doesn't matter what anybody else drives, what other trips they take, what other kinds of homes they live in, how they improve those homes. It doesn't matter all the fancy things they have and, technological gadgets. For me, man, my path, this is my path. Whatever it takes, I will be faithful to it. And then just one more. And I know this is going a little bit long. You know it's going a little bit long because you were waiting for the 9:15 afterwards. But hang in there. We're almost done. We're almost done. And I would have cut this one out, but I felt like this was a word that God has for some of you. And you need to hear it. And that's why you're here today. For some of you, you are doing all the right things. You've got the work balance right. You are deeply involved in your relationships. You're sacrificing for the people you care about. You are praying so much that your knees are raw. You get down on your knees so often, and you still feel like you're losing ground. You're still having a hard time keeping your head above water. And actually, that's how I felt at the end of 2012. Nobody does what I do, what Ann does, what Stephen does. Without the knowledge that somewhere along the line, the depths of the suffering that you're going to see is going to, somewhere along the line, make it very difficult for you. And that's why we build structures in our lives to keep ourselves afloat. And I have those structures. One of those structures is praying. And as I came to the end of 2013, so much suffering just all around. It was like, oh, man. And I just heard God say to me, not in a glib promise, not in a naive sort of way, but I heard Him say to me the words of Julian of Norwich. All will be well. All manner of things will be well. All will be well. And if that's you, if you're having a hard time there, you're doing everything right, you're praying, but man, God just seems absent, you feel like you're losing ground, then what you need to do in 2013 is just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Just one foot in front of the other. Just hang in there. Lean into God and know that even though you can't see it now, even though you can't sense it now, just lean into Him and know that He is good, and that one day, in a way that you cannot understand, but one day, all will be well. Every manner of thing will be well. All will be well. And it will. Well, yesterday, and with this I close, yesterday we did a funeral here. There was a young woman who was, we were burying a grandmother, and the grandmother's granddaughter gave the eulogy. And it was a beautiful eulogy, one of the most beautiful eulogies I've ever heard. And part of what made it so beautiful is she captured her grandmother's love so well, so eloquently. And because her grandmother had loved her so well. And there were many things in that eulogy that touched me, but there was one line I just wanted to share with you today. It really touched my heart. She said this of her grandmother. She said, "I've never been famous a day of my life, but Gammy always made me feel like a star. She was my #1 fan. We never had a phone conversation where she didn't tell me she loved me. And I've never gone a single week of my life without her telling me how proud she was of me. She is the only person in this world who never got mad at me, who I could tell my mistakes to without fear of being judged, and who every time I hated myself, reminded me of all the good things about me." And then she goes on to ask this question: do you have any idea what that kind of love can do for a person? Do you have any idea what that kind of love can do for a person? And I don't think we do. I don't think we know how much hangs in the balance in these decisions that God is calling us to make. To pay attention to the relationships that need tending. To break those destructive habits and behaviors that have caused us so much hurt for so long. To make good financial decisions and be faithful to God. I don't think we know how much hangs in the balance, how important this is, how great the impact could be on our family, our friends, our church, the world. And that's why I hope, dear and beloved friends, with everything that is in me, that when we walk out those doors today, that one thing that God has been talking to you about, that one thing that you know in your heart before I ever said anything, that you will say with me, "This is my path, and I will be faithful to it." And that when we go through those doors, we will. Amen. Amen.